preference on who should start first, Emily?
No, whoever wants to start, go right ahead.
Okay, Tom, do you have a preference?
You can start, Fry.
Okay. I just have a few words. Just teasing. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining, those of you who are on the Zoom. We appreciate it. This is in line with what we're looking to do as we increase our collaboration with the community. So I was asked by Emily if I would come and present some words and speak to you about the police department. A lot of people don't even know that we actually have 2 police departments. So we can sort of speak about some of the differences and many of the same things actually that we do. We work very closely together. So just to give you a little bit about the police department, we have 43 employees essentially. 21 are sworn officers, one being a Class 2 special, and that's the officer that is assigned to the school, and then sometimes assigned to assist us in additional help when we need it. We have 2 administrative support staff, and we have 2 parking officers that work full-time in the downtown and around the borough for parking issues. Of the 21 officers, we do have 2 full-time traffic safety officers and 1 community services officer. We have 2 detectives that work full-time investigating crimes, and the rest of the personnel make up the supervision staff and the command staff. Our budget's about $3.35 million plus, about $2.9 million of salary and wages, and about $400,000+ in operating. And I am proud to say that we're an accredited police agency. We were at one time a nationally accredited agency, which means we met all of the standards for national accreditation under the Commission for Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. That was in 2007. We have since become 2 times state accredited. That is with the New Jersey Chiefs of Police Association. And interestingly, I now sit as a commissioner on the state accreditation board for the Chiefs Association accreditation program. What does that mean? That means the system set up to monitor best practices, to perform inspections. We do daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual, biannual, biennial, all types of inspections to ensure that we're meeting best practices in policing. And most of those practices are centered around critical issues that at times can plague police departments that are not watching for them. So we have essentially been accredited since 2007 on to today, and actually started the pursuit of accreditation about 2002. So it's been a long time that we have been adopting best practices in our agency. We're a goals-driven agency, which means we have annual goals that we submit to the borough and internally, heavy on service, as you most already know. And we are proud to practice and train on procedural justice principles and on the Pelian principles, which we have done many times over the previous years, actually. Those principles talk about fundamental fairness, treating people respectfully, giving people an opportunity to be heard, transparency in policing, and impartiality, among other things in the Pelian principles. That basically and essentially talks about the police are the public and the public are the police, and we subscribe to that. We have been working on increasing our community outreach and our partnerships recently over the past few years, and COVID is making that quite difficult now, but this is a good example of where we're finding alternatives. We have, for instance, just ramped up our COVID ambassador program, which we're rolling out over the next week or so. And we spoke about that at the council meeting this past Monday, which is essentially volunteers who want to participate in helping to remind residents, visitors, employees, and business owners that it's important to wear a mask, and it is important to socially distance when you can, and to help each other. We are in this pandemic together, and I think it's essential that people work together. This will be the gentle reminder for people that it's important that you do what you can to help your residents, your partners, your family, your friends, and your community members. I think it's super important. So we're also working on programs like the surveillance camera program, the volunteer program that I know Chief Miller has rolled out in Chatham Township. which will allow people to right now register online that they have a surveillance camera at their home. We don't necessarily get access to that camera. We just have the information that it's there in the event that we need it. I think it's a great program. We are working on a program to include cameras at the train station. We recently rolled out our police chaplain program and beefed up that program considerably, and we're working on even beefing it up more in the coming months.
Let's see what this has to do with anything.
We hosted a National Night Out last year for our first time, and we're participating in Facebook, Twitter, the rave alerts, which I hope all of you are registered for, not only just for the alerts, but for the Smart 911. So if you don't understand the difference, the rave alerts allow us to reach out to you, but the Smart 911 gives us the information we need when we respond to help you. So I think it's important that we participate in these programs to help you when we arrive, that we have an understanding of what's going on in the house. For instance, it would be important for us to know that you may use electrical equipment for medical devices, and then if we have a power outage, we can actually reach out to you when we learn of that that you are using certain medical equipment like a CPAP or a respirator or something along those lines. We have our bicycle program back in place, so we have officers back on bicycles to help get on the ground level with residents and with the children as well. So getting into agency professionalism and accountability, separate from the accreditation program, we practice the guardian mindset principles. We are culture driven, and I think it's important because we create, I think that's what plagues a lot of departments that have some of the troubles that we have seen recently, as that they're not necessarily practicing what they have in their written policies, and they don't have a culture that condones, or rather that does condone poor behavior. We do the opposite. So we have a culture here that we expect professionalism and we demand it. We practice our core values, and we are practicing the Attorney General's excellence in policing models, including our own program, which we're rolling out by the end of the year, called the TOPS program for increased transparency, which I know is a big issue with many different people around the country today who are demanding that police departments are more transparent. We built up and are actively using our data mining and analytics systems to analyze everything from use of force to types of calls for service to overtime. Everything's included in that. So we're able to analyze our systems on a regular basis. We have a pretty robust training program and professional development. Just as an example, I mentioned this at a previous council meeting, that training is super important to maintain accountability and professionalism in policing. We have spent since 2015 11,846 hours training, 7,188 hours just in the critical areas that deal with the issues that are actually plaguing police all over the country. And I wouldn't say so much in Jersey. I think Jersey is doing a very good job at maintaining that level of accountability. Those hours were spent on things like handling mentally ill, dealing with people with autism, dealing with suicide type behaviors, responding to certain types of critical type calls, domestics and disputes that can sometimes easily get out of control. So supervision and management, we use a lot of systems like our Guardian tracking system, an electronic system to manage the performance of our personnel. Power DMS, another system we use. We have about 70 systems that we use, computerized systems that analyze and communicate with the officers, both inside headquarters and remotely out in the field, and even on their cell phone, actually. We have a training platform that's all electronic that allows us to do in-service training, both electronically through presentations, through videos, through PowerPoints, and through actual instruction, in addition to visiting in service when COVID's over. And lastly, we have our L3 mobile vision camera system in place. We are doing a feasibility study on body cameras to analyze the costs and feasibility of moving toward body cameras. So we have a lot of systems in place for agency accountability, and I think that's a big issue around the country, is what is being done to analyze or manage accountability in policing. We have tons of systems in place and have for many, many years. And I'm happy to say we have met those standards on a routine basis. And I thank you for an opportunity to speak to you all here tonight. and I'm happy to take any questions after Chief Miller.
Thank you, Brian. I probably could have recorded yours and just played it for mine because we're pretty much identical in most respects. But I just want to take this opportunity to thank the Library of the Chatham, particularly Emily, for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. I won't bore you with what I do. I will tell you a little bit about what we do as a department. Chatham Township Police Department is, just like Chatham Borough, fully accredited by New Jersey State Association Chiefs of Police. We're a progressive and modern police agency performing all functions required and expected of a police agency in New Jersey. Our department, which currently consists of 21 sworn officers, including one SLEO 3, who's assigned to the Lafayette School, 4 crossing guards, and 2 civilian administrative personnel. Our department is divided into 3 separate divisions. The Patrol Division, which is tasked with all patrol functions, including traffic safety. The Investigative Division, we currently have 2 detectives assigned to that division, which are responsible for all follow-up investigations, including firearms, permitting, and general investigations. Finally, the Administrative Division, which is responsible for the accreditation process, policy writing, internal affairs, and departmental training. The Chatham Township Police Department is comprised of a dedicated group of professionals, each of whom take great pride in their profession, which is clearly reflective in the quality of service they provide to the residents and the visitors of Chatham Township. As a chief, I continue to seek and embrace changes that will ensure that our community remains a great place to live and visit. To accomplish this, the values and principles upon which the department was founded will continue to play a major role in how we serve the public and will be used as our parameters for our future success. As this vibrant community continues to grow and the Chatham Township Police Department continues to move forward, we will work each day to maintain the highest standards of professional ethics and personal integrity. All members continually strive for improvement by thoroughly embracing the concept of accreditation and our complete commitment to continuing to educate ourselves not only professionally but on a personal level. To that end, we have a very robust training program and philosophy which goes well beyond the required annual, biannual, and biennial trainings. Just to name a few recent trainings we have partaken in: 1, de-escalation techniques, positional asphyxiation training, mental health first aid, and most recently, Safe Talk, which is training specific to suicide prevention. As we all know, there's a huge spike in suicides within the county. I believe the latest data was 52% over last year. We've been fortunate to have sought out assistance from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They've been very helpful in providing the mental health first aid training as well as a Safe Talk, and we're currently trying to add their ASSIST training, which is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. Chatham Township Police Department implemented a unique community policing philosophy in 2009, which many departments have adopted the same model. Our community policing program divides our community into 12 community policing districts. Each district is assigned an officer to be the primary contact and liaison between the citizens, community groups, and law enforcement. The program is an excellent example of an initiative way to bridge the gap between the agency and the residents we serve. It allows residents to put a human face to the agency that they rely on for continued support and protection, and encourages all officers to take ownership of community concerns. Our officers are heavily engaged in our community policing efforts. To bolster our community policing, we have a 5-member police bike unit, which has been operational for the past year. Our bike patrol is easily deployed anywhere in the township. We currently have a few bike racks that the guys will put on the back of the patrol cars and go anywhere in town, and they're deployed that way. Additionally, we currently have 4 certified lead law enforcement against drug and violence instructors who teach at the 4th grade at the Lafayette Avenue School and the 5th grade at the Chatham Day School. Other programs of interest are Coffee with a Cop, which prior to the pandemic was done 2 times throughout the year. National Night Out, which typically held on the first Tuesday of August, but unfortunately has been canceled for this year. The DEA National Prescription Drug Take-Back, which typically is held biannually, typically in April and October. In addition to the DEA Take-Back, there's a prescription drug box in our lobby at the police headquarters, which is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Lastly, in conjunction with the Morris County Sheriff's Department and Daytop, New Jersey, we have adopted the Hope Perry, which is the Police-Assisted Addiction and Recovery Initiative. This initiative is intended to give residents of Morris County a safe way to seek help for substance use disorders without fear of arrest, as well as to provide resources for their recovery. All of our officers have been trained as screening officers for this program. In closing, this is just a brief overview of what we do here at Chatham Township Police. I invite any of you, if you need any more information, to seek out one of my officers. They'll be more than happy to explain more, or just stop in and see me. I'd be more than happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Brian and Tom. Okay, I have received three questions that were emailed to us through the librarian at chathamlibrary.org. I will read those questions, each give you an opportunity to answer them, and then we'll open it up to the chat, and I will read the questions in chat. The first question I have is the person would like to know the opinion of the chiefs regarding the Ring home security cameras. They are cropping up everywhere in our neighborhood. They've gotten a bad rap in the news because of the potential for hackers who get into the system. Could they be easily compromised or vandalized? Gentlemen.
Tom, you want to start?
Go ahead.
I'll jump in. So I would say, whether they can be hacked or not is a better question for Ring. I'm not aware of an outbreak of hacking going on, particularly in Ring cameras. I do think that it could be, in some cases, some user error as to whether or not they're setting up proper passcodes. The Ring program, and I know the Township is doing it as well, so I know I speak for Chief Miller. We are both, they are signed on with the Neighborhood Watch program for Ring. I believe they're signed on already. We have a sign on. There was a legal issue initially, and I think that's getting cleared up. So we support the Ring camera system. I do, at least. I think that it allows, especially the Ring Neighborhood Watch program, allows communities to work together. I would just caution people who are using these systems to be a bit careful and not be hypersensitive every time somebody walks up to your front door and the Ring goes off. We have gotten calls in the past where people have called up on somebody, and in many cases it's a delivery person. And if it is a delivery person who happens to be a minority, it can become a little difficult for us when we're in that uncomfortable position. And we have seen some of those instances. Furthermore, I think what you must be careful about is to avoid the potential issue with recording somebody, the audio version, and that's something that people should be weary of. The systems in a lot of cases will allow for audio and video. The video is perfectly legal, but if you're recording somebody without their knowledge and you're not present, you could find yourself in a difficult position. So that is something to be weary of, to not run audio when you're not present at that instance. But separate from that, we support it. In fact, we're looking at Ring as one of the vendors for the train station. And I know that Chief Miller, who might want to jump in, is also working with the Ring Neighborhood Watch program.
I think we're having some problems. I think we lost contact with Tom.
Yeah, I think we did, yeah.
I think, and he's trying to reconnect.
I think we broke Zoom.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we can read up Tom is almost back.
Listen, I can tell you also, I really enjoyed a working relationship I have with Chief Miller. We are, we would meet on a regular basis prior to COVID, and would also attend conferences together, attend networking events together, share ideas together on projects and programs. Obviously, they're a bit different, the towns, in certain respects, but I think you'll find a huge amount of similarities in the type of officers and the type of response in both police departments.
Tom, you back with us?
I'm back.
Okay, good. Did you hear the question about Ring? What was your thoughts on Ring?
I did not hear the question.
Okay, Brian was answered about the Ring home security cameras. They're everywhere in the township and the borough. And do you think they could be easily hacked, compromised, or vandalized? But I think, and being that, unfortunately, that you didn't hear what Brian had to say, but he was thinking that the Ring is a good system, just to be aware.
Yeah, Tom, I mentioned that you're already partnered with the Ring Watch program. If I spoke correctly, there was some legal issues with it up front. I know that we both spoke about that, and that we are actually engaging with them as well, and probably going to use maybe their system down at the train station. But I just caution people about recording audio when they're not present, and the dangers of doing that, and whether or not they're using it properly, encrypted properly with the right passwords.
Yeah, they would definitely need to safeguard a little better than taking it out of the box and using the generic passwords. But yeah, it's a great tool for us. I mean, we've solved a number of cases based off of Ring, as well as Ness. So, I mean, it's a great tool for police departments.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to the next. It's actually a series of questions. This individual would like to ask, what are both towns doing to prevent future home invasions and car thefts overnight? That's part one of the question. Do they use cameras to monitor Route 124 or the entrance of 24? How about using license plate reader device to identify known stolen cars or other suspicious vehicles? And unfortunately, some residents may not realize that you should lock their home or put the take your car fobs into the house. How about sending a postcard to every home once a year as a reminder? So that's kind of a multi-phased question.
Tom, you want to start?
Let's go.
Like, I can't speak of the cameras on 124 or 24. What I can tell you is we are diligently out there nightly, whether you see us in a police car or not. I cannot give away our tactics, but trust me, we are out there. And the most important thing is everybody needs to keep their doors and their vehicles locked and remove the key fob out. If we remove the opportunity, I'm hoping that it's not too long before these bad elements continue on to another town.
Yes, I agree. These are crimes of opportunity, and I think when you allow the opportunity to exist, it proliferates. So it is really important, and it starts with locking your car, because if they come and your cars are unlocked, then they're only going to assume that you left the doors open, and that becomes much more problematic for us. So yes, we are looking at those types of technologies. I will say we do have an LPR system, which is a license plate reader that we do put out. There are some technical issues that we have on occasion with it. As you might imagine, with everything becoming so technical now with all the new computer systems, we run into problems periodically. There are talks about building on those systems, including other camera systems. So and I think it's important that residents report suspicious behavior. I think that's important. Not suspicious people. Don't focus on people individually. Focus on their behavior. What are they doing? Are they hiding? Is it late at night? Are they in somebody's backyard that you're not familiar with? What are they doing? And report the behaviors to us. And that's really important. And I think once we tackle the opportunity issues, some of the other issues go away. Interestingly and fortunately, home invasions are rare in both the borough and the township. But on occasion, they do happen. There have been spates of these types of crimes, and we will work aggressively both with the Morris County Prosecutor's Office and with our partner agencies, the Morris County Sheriff's Office. We will deploy certain techniques or tactics that I won't describe here today, but we have done it in the past and will continue to do it as these things happen, and we've done it recently. So, but fortunately, it is rare, and your help is most important in helping to eliminate it.
Okay. My last question that I received through the library emails is, as you're well aware, everyone comes to an interaction with an officer with their own personal history. Some people have had negative, unfair, or frightening interaction with officers wherever they have lived in the past. And it will naturally affect how the experience and interaction with a Chatham police officer today. How do you address this in your training and practices? And can you reflect a little bit on your own experiences as both an officer and a chief, knowing that your work is shaped by this larger social context?
Tom, you care to start, or?
All right, Brian, why don't you, Tom started the last one off.
So, yes, these types of social issues have affected my career all along the way. I started my career in the City of Orange Police Department, and unfortunately at that time we did deal with some social issues, and we did have some officers that were indicted for misconduct and criminal behaviors that involved deprivation of civil rights. So without question, that has affected the way I police and the way I manage and oversee the department. Without question, there are issues where people are either fearful, nervous, anxious when a police officer stops them or encounters them. But we provide tremendous amounts of training on de-escalation, on less lethal force, on actual physical hands-free physical self-defense. We actually train on that. One of the few agencies, I think, that meets that standard in accreditation, where we train officers on wrestling tactics and jiu-jitsu type mixed martial arts tactics to handle themselves without having to use force when we can avoid it. So the training is robust, it's ongoing, it continues to happen on a regular basis. We have a culture that ensures that people are treated with respect. Now, that doesn't mean that we are always treated with respect, and the officers are confronted with some difficult situations at times, some of which can be very dangerous and life-threatening at times, and do require the use of force. I can tell you when those instances have happened, our officers use force very reasonably. They're very restrained in their use of force, and they practice simple courtesies that I think win respect from people we deal with. And those are pretty easy to deliver. It doesn't cost money to do that, to treat people with respect. And I believe if you practice those fundamental principles, those Peelian principles, procedural justice, which is treating people fairly, which is allowing them an opportunity to be heard, and treating with respect and transparency, I think it goes a long way. So those of you who are out there, or the person who expressed that concern, I can assure you that we are a friendly face. We are here to help. The one thing I would ask from people out there who are nervous is, when you're dealing with the police, to relax and just simply follow the initial commands, whether that's on a motor vehicle stop or on a Terry stop or a stop on the street. If they stop, just arrive on scene to speak with you. Just comply. I promise you, they're going to work this out peacefully and calmly, and just give the officers an opportunity to just make sure the scene is safe, and then move forward with dealing with those instances. So yes, my career has been affected dramatically from issues that I've dealt with in the past, or I have seen or witnessed, and it affects the way we police today. And I think it helps create a culture that avoids the type of issues that you see in some parts of the country that are dealing with some struggles right now.
Tom?
I agree with Chief Gibbons. I started at a department completely different than Chatham Township. I started in a department that was just like Brian came from, Dover Police Department. But we start with our training process. We get a feel of who we're training, and from day one, that they hit the road, we instill in them that they will treat people like they would treat their mother or their sister or their brother or anyone else in their family. So any interaction that my officers have with anyone is normally a pleasant one. And it's substantiated with the fact that our internal affairs complaints for demeanor are slim to none. So we drive that point home continuously, that, you know, everybody should be treated with respect, no matter who they are, no matter what they've done, and that's the way we conduct ourselves here. And we monitor that we continually are monitoring their in-vehicle camera recordings, and, you know, our supervisors do a very good job of getting out in front of a problem before it becomes a problem.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Next question I have, it's from chat. And do you find that your officers are called to incidents that would be more appropriate handled by social workers or mental health professionals?
Unfortunately, we do get a lot of those calls, but my officers are very well versed in mental health first aid and, you know, taking a situation and dissecting it to the point where, you know, we call the right people out and get the assistance that they need right away. So I think that we're more than capable of doing some pre-screening that a mental health provider would take a lot longer to respond out to do. So in that respect, I think that, you know, we're more than capable of handling the mental health issues that we handle on basically a day-to-day basis.
Anything in addition to that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. I can tell you I've dealt with many times in my career where I would have loved to have a social worker on scene with me. It's just not always practical and sometimes just not possible. At the end of the day, there are times where police officers are entrusted. They are civilians who were granted certain authority to deal with, at times, violent subjects. They may be violent because they're angry, or they may be violent because they're experiencing some sort of psychological distress. And even if we had a counselor on scene at times, it may not have helped and would have required a certain degree of force to get control of the situation. You have to remember, we're typically called on 911 to show up for someone who is having a psychological break or just having just an anger issue and just acting disorderly. Because essentially the people that were on scene were not able to handle it. And I think once we come, our officers are trained really well to de-escalate. We have been trained to de-escalate for a long time. We took verbal judo years ago to help the officers learn how to talk their way. And I'm a firm believer that one of your greatest tools is your calm voice. And our officers, on a regular basis, I get letters of commendation on a regular basis. Officer Chisik, Agnes Chisik, is a great example of an officer who I routinely get called. In fact, I got called yesterday for her, for the letters for her ability to de-escalate scenes. So yes, I think it would be great to have a mental health expert on scene. There are times where we've actually called for them and couldn't get them because we needed them. I can think of 2 times in particular that were very, very serious incidents that ended up working out with 0 use of force, and both of them, one was about 3.5 or 4 hours in length, the other was about 2 or 2.5 hours, if I remember correctly, and within a span of 2 weeks of each other. And it was a very, very difficult, exhausting response. I was on scene for both of them. I remember them vividly. And it is difficult to get out mental health experts at times. So there may be opportunity for improvement with that moving forward, maybe even on the county level. But I can assure you, and I know I speak for Chief Miller as well, our officers are trained extensively on dealing with people with mental illness, on disabilities, dealing with autism and some of the behaviors with autism, and de-escalation, and how to deal with people using the minimal degree of force. And that is evident both in our statistics and in the letters that I receive on a routine basis.
Thank you, Chiefs. Now, this is a question that I had a feeling we'd get a question like this. How can parties like the one that caused the COVID outbreak in the high school be controlled by the police?
Well, Chief Miller, I'll start off with this one. I think first and foremost, it should be controlled by the parents. And I think that should be understood first and foremost. And I won't get specific about this case, but I've dealt with parties like this in years past where there have been instances where parents either provided an opportunity for it, they cooperated with it. So I think it starts there, but that's not the only place, right? Children will be children at times. Young adults will do things probably like we all have done at one time or another, and make some poor judgment calls in certain things that they do. We are happy in this particular case that they're speaking about that happened recently. We were not called to that particular event. When we are, we use a degree of reasonableness. It is, I think it's vitally important for parents to understand the liability they take on if they host, if they provide alcohol, if they encourage the use of alcohol for underage drinking. One of the programs we work with MAC and the NCC and all the different groups that we're a part of is the one who hosts loses the most. And that is true without fail. So if you're doing it because you thought it was a good idea to have your child drinking at home with you, and you bring over some friends from someone else's family, you're asking for really big trouble. I have seen the other side of that, where there have been, DWI fatalities, serious injuries, children who drank so much they were shipped off to the hospital for medical intervention. That was very, very serious. And the liability is absolutely enormous, both civilly and criminally. So I think it's important. We're happy to respond when we get calls. We will use a degree of reasonableness when it's young adults doing what young adults do, and we'll address that. But I think adults should be on notice that if they're going to cooperate, or they're going to provide an opportunity or a resort or their home for this type of behavior, and we do end up getting called, they are subject to potential criminal liability.
Tom?
I really have nothing to add to that other than,
Okay.
like Chief Gibbons said, parents are responsible for during and after if they're going to provide alcohol at these parties. And they really need to be aware of that. And, they're opening themselves up to criminal and civil liability.
Mm-hmm.
We're happy to help in the absence of parents. Locus parentis. We're happy to act as the parent when they're not there. And I've driven many children home to parents who were quite upset. But I think we need parents' help sometimes. Some of these things are better handled initially at the family level.
And then we have a question. Other than COVID, what are your biggest challenges today?
Tom, you want to start?
I would say other than COVID, right now, we have these criminal individuals coming into town on a nightly or weekly basis. It's trying to weed them out. We've chased them out of town. We've arrested quite a few, and we need the help of the residents to continue to lock their doors, continue to take the key fobs out of their cars, and hopefully we can drive these individuals out of our town.
I think in addition to what Chief Miller was talking about, and I understand why in some respects, but all of the issues that plague society are sort of expected to be handled by the police when they're at their absolute worst. And that is really, really difficult. It is a tremendous burden on civilians who become police officers and have taken the oath to protect others and to provide services. But what has happened, and I know we actually touched on a bit of it before, the changes in mental health, the facilities. It's hard to get a bed for somebody who's having some mental health crisis. It's hard to get a bed for somebody who's having a drug crisis. But it was never hard to get a bed for someone who committed a criminal act. So I think we can do better as a society at helping these people who are in need, whether it's drug issues, whether it is alcohol-related issues, whether it is issues involving mental health. I think mental health is becoming one of the most complicated issues for us to deal with, on a fairly regular basis. And I think it'll continue to be that way. We will continue to rise to the occasion and go well above the bar of expectation so that we can respond responsibly and carefully to those types of calls and deal with them with the greatest level of restraint. But they are very, very difficult and complicated calls to manage. And we are seeing an increase in those calls, in addition to the routine calls that we go on every single day, the expectation from, from everything from handling COVID-related executive order violations to handling issues with children who are underage and drinking, to handling with people who have had a psychological break because they've lost their job, or those who want to commit suicide and have decided to either call the police or families have called the police, or they have called the police in essence to have the police help them do that. These are real issues that are being dealt with all across the country, and most specifically in New Jersey, and at times here in the Chatham. So it is difficult, and we are continuing to train to respond to them, and we will meet or exceed the expectations. But it does put a huge burden. It's why the township and is working so hard on the suicide programs. We too are working with the suicide watch programs. In fact, we're the first agency in the state of New Jersey to bring in cop to cop for in-house training to teach officers what to be on the lookout for with other officers. And I think you're hitting a key point, Emily, with that question. If officers are not mentally and physically healthy, they will not be able to provide the expected service that we demand as chiefs. So it is essential that we make sure their mental and physical health is maintained at a level that is, that is well, that where they're, free of the stresses that most people are dealing with. So we go to great lengths to do it on a regular basis. I've done it recently. We work with the county, with the state on different programs, and with resiliency program, which has just stood up recently. Sergeant Jerome is our resiliency officer and works with our officers when they need help. So just like Chief Miller said earlier, we can catch it, nip it in the bud before it becomes a problem that you read about in the paper. So I would say those are some of the most pressing issues we're dealing with today, in addition to or separate from some of the civil unrest we're seeing around the country for policing in general.
Next question. Are there opportunities for shared services between your departments?
We share services all the time, actually. In fact, the dispatch center is a great example of sharing services with the county. I'm very delighted at the work that we get with that shared service. We are actively working with the Madison Police Department right now on some additional initiatives. We work on a routine basis with Chatham Township Police Department and others. So sharing services is pretty much a given, and we look to share services as often as we can, including personnel.
Tom, anything more?
Just to add, we also share a municipal court. But like Brian said, we probably are maxed out at what we share. We share officers all the time, and that's about the extent that we can contribute at this point.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, the next question I have is, drug-related issues. What are you seeing as a trend in drug use and abuse, and how much, if any, of it has a positive impact Sheriff Gannon's Hope One initiative had in our community and schools?
Tom, do you want to start that one?
Sure. It's a little hard to gauge what impact Hope One has had on our community. I know when they're in town, they normally come twice a year, and that there is a big turnout. They were just in town, I believe it was August 7th. What we're seeing currently is strictly the marijuana. We've made a few arrests with marijuana gummies. They seem to be packaging a little different, some wax. We've had one opioid overdose in the past 2 years, so I'm not really seeing too much in terms of that. But, you know, it's strictly, what I'm seeing is marijuana.
Yeah, I'd agree with Chief Miller, and that came up recently, actually, in a committee meeting we had about drug use and alcohol use. I would think alcohol and marijuana are most prevalent now, interestingly, after all we went through with the opioid epidemic. I think the work that Sheriff Gannon's done with the CARES and the Hope One program and with CARES is outstanding, and it's having a very meaningful impact countywide, which indirectly is really helping with the borough and the township in helping people. We too are part of the Parity program Chief Miller spoke about before, which helps to, you know, nip the criminal issues up front in an effort to help solve the social issue of drug use and alcohol use, so that we can get the people help and then get them improved and then get them productive and back to their lives. And I think it has been meaningful impact. We were seeing a lot more opioid-related issues in years past that have simmered down a bit, but it is always on our radar, something we're always concerned about. Certainly the alcohol and the marijuana is a big issue. And I would encourage anybody on the line here, we have attended and participated in the Hidden in Plain Sight program. That's a wonderful program. I believe it's the DEA that puts it on. And they hosted, Project Pride has it quite often over at the, or I think it's really the Y that hosts it, at the Madison Y. And it's about what you should be looking for with your teenage children and where they may be hiding some of these things that we're talking about. It's a real eye-opener. You know, I've been doing this a long time. I started my career in the city of Orange, and it was a pretty significant drug problem when I was there. And I learned a lot from sitting in that presentation. And it really opened my eyes. So if it shocked me, it will be a quantum leap in your understanding for what goes on behind the scenes. And I would argue the same goes true with the social media sites and making sure you're kind of keeping an eye on those social media sites. It's difficult for us, and I know it. It's difficult for you because we're dealing with the fallout from it on occasion. So I think that's a good example of how to maybe help your own children out or your own family members out.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Tom. Do we have any more questions for the chat? It's looking like no. So I would like to say thank you to everyone who has attended this evening. Most definitely thank you to Chief Thomas Miller of the Chatham Township Police Department and Chief Brian Gibbons of the Chatham Borough Police Department. And I hope everybody learned something and enjoyed this program. I have one comment from the bottom. I think it's Steve A. I think we know who that is. Thanks for your dedication, both of you. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for all of our attendees. And we will be posting on our social media sites probably tomorrow.
Emily, I think there's another question that popped up there too about police officers in the school.
What was that, Tom? I can't,
I see when it says, do you have police officers at all schools?
okay, I missed that. I'm sorry. Do you have police officers at all schools?
I'm not quite sure if I understand. Yes, we do. The police officers visit every single school. We have one dedicated Class 2 special who's assigned specifically to the schools and rotates between the school in a very random fashion. So we don't have a person dedicated to every single school all day, every day. But not only do our officers visit on a routine basis, including the private schools in the borough, ECLC and St. Pat's, but we have the Class 2 that makes the rounds for the school districts of the Chatham on a regular basis. And say hello to him, Agapito Guzman, Officer Guzman, great officer with tremendous experience. So he'd be happy to say hello to you to see him around.
And the schools department, public schools have, they have their own security guards in place, correct? Yeah.
Yes, they do. Great point, Emily. They do. They have their own security guards as well, in addition to the police officers or the Class 2 specials or Class 3 specials that are visiting the schools every day.
Yeah, and I know that most of the security personnel that is through the school systems are mostly retired law enforcement as well.
Yeah, very seasoned. Very seasoned.
Yes.
And we have one SLEO Class 3 who's stationed at the Lafayette Avenue School. But like
Okay.
you just said, our officers rotate throughout the day. I require them, every officer, to go in at least each school once during the day, including the Chatham Day School.
Excellent.
So we just lost the SLEO 3 to the high school.
Okay.
So, but that's still staffed by Chris Tomato.
Right. Okay. Retired Chatham Borough police officer.
That's right. I might add, Chief Miller, a retired Chatham Borough police officer. An excellent example. And there's not a person on the forum or in town that doesn't know Chris. So, Chris, if you're watching, thank you for all your years here and for your continued work up at the Township. It's much appreciated. I've called him many, many times, even when he retired. So, great person.
Thank you very much. There's lots of comments about God bless you and keep you all safe. Thank you to both chiefs, and you're welcome, Evan Skinner. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great evening. Everybody stay healthy and stay safe.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Call one of us if you have additional questions you'd like to talk offline or if you'd like to visit.
You can always email me, eLajeunesse, ELAJEUNESSE @chathamlibrary.org.
Or you can reach out to the chiefs right on the websites for the respective departments if you have any additional questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great evening.
Everybody, take care.
Take care.